Hello, and welcome to Functional Groups Part 2. We're going to talk about the remaining 4 functional groups that you need to know from Table R. We're going to talk about organic acids first, which we've talked a little bit about when we talked about acids and bases. Organic acids, remember, have what we call that Cu group. Their functional group has a double bonded O and a single bonded OH. And these are really special because of those 2 oxygens there. So in our general formula, we have a bunch of carbons in a row, or maybe not, but on the very end of that whole thing, we have this Cu functional group. Similar compounds to this, and this can also, remember, be written like this, so keep in mind that you're looking for that Cu group if you're trying to identify one of these. Similar compounds to these include the esters. An ester is like an organic acid with a functional group in the middle of the molecule. We do need to look for 2 oxygens, one with a double bond, and one with an OH. And that has to occur at the end of a molecule. Now, we want to look at how we're going to name an organic acid. So the example they've given us here is propanoic acid. Oh, the ending's acid. That helps. So prop is because there are 3 carbons in a row here. So when we want to name one of these, we start with our table P prefix. So rather than this being propane, we remove the E, and we put on the ending oic acid. So our prefix is just based on our number of carbons from table P. Our suffix here is oic acid. There are no numbers involved in this type of naming because Cu groups have to be on the end of a molecule. These function as organic acids because this H can dissociate, which we talked about a little bit before. The reason that H is able to dissociate is these oxygens are electron sinks. They have a very, very high electronegativity. Oh, I got a nice little structure down here. Actually, there's more lone pairs on this guy too. Oxygens are tiny and highly electronegative. So what they actually do is they just suck electrons, well, the one electron, away from that hydrogen that it has. And then that hydrogen is able to pop off as an H+, just a naked proton because its electron got sucked off. So even though this is the same side of the staircase molecule and it's carbon-based and we would not expect it to dissociate, it does dissociate. And you're never going to really see a question that's asking you to fully describe that, but it is important to identify that Cu groups actually are acids, and that does make them electrolytes, and they are able to dissociate. Butanoic acid, we'll smell this in class. I'll let you experience that then. I wish I could do it over the computer. Fatty acids are one type of Cu group molecule, so you've heard of triglycerides before, and these are actually also categorized as what we call cis and trans fats. So you can see right here that there's these double bonds in some of these molecules, and whether or not both of the H's are up and one down is what classifies a fat as cis or trans. And you guys have heard that trans fats are very bad for you. As you can see, the way that this cis molecule is bent like this, the fact that it takes up more space makes it harder for these fat molecules to pack tightly in your body. Also, fats that occur naturally with double bonds in them are cis. Ones that are man-made are trans. And our bodies just aren't as capable to break down trans fats that are man-made. So this is a couple pictures of a saturated fat. Saturated fat just means this has all single bonds in it. And as you can see, that's packed pretty tightly, so it's tricky for the body to break down. Once we have an unsaturated fat, so a lot of plant oils and things like that, with these nice cis unsaturated situations where you have these double bonds, they cause this branching. And this molecule doesn't pack as tightly as the one that we would see in beef fat. Carboxylic acids occur really commonly in nature, as we call them organic acids for that reason. They can be liquid at room temperature. They have pretty moderate intermolecular forces, and they can interact well with water. They dissociate and dissolve in water because they have polarity. If you look at these molecules, they're pretty asymmetric. They're very similar to the esters. Esters are compounds that you probably don't really realize that you're as familiar with as you are. The ester functional group has that double-bonded O, has that single-bonded O, but there's actually a strand of carbons on either side. So this is really like a Cu group in the middle of a molecule. We don't have the H attached to that single-bonded O. As I mentioned, these are like the organic acids, which traditionally were actually called carboxylic acids. These are identifiable by looking for two oxygens, one with a single bond, one double in the middle of the molecule. Now these are actually probably the trickiest compounds to name. So we're going to look at this name methylpropanoate. So keep in mind, prop means 3 carbons in a row, and meth means 1 carbon in a row. So when you're looking at this molecule, this chain actually gets, if you will, interrupted by oxygen. So the methyl right here is actually talking about this, that 1 carbon in a row. Whereas the prop right here is talking about these 3 carbons in a row, including the one that has the double bonded oxygen on it. So the way we name these is we first have to name the part that comes off of the single bonded O. Now I know this looks like it's oriented a little bit backwards, but this is pretty standard in how these are written. So we're first gonna name the branch off of the single bonded O. And then we're going to name chain with the double bonded O. So our prefix here is actually a substituent, so methyl ethyl propyl, and we also use table P. And our ending for an ester is O8. So instead of propane, that becomes propanoate. You drop that E and you add O8. And no, we don't need numbers. We actually, because we have that carbon in the middle, you'll notice that this is similar to how ethers are named. Putting that O in the middle allows us to kind of break this name down into 2 parts, so we don't actually have to use a number to show where things are. These are similar to organic acids. If you look at ethanoate or ethanoic acid in comparison to methyl ethanoate, which is this guy right here, we are just basically taking this Cu group that was up here, and then that H is coming off, and instead we're sticking another carbon on there. This is very commonly used as a solvent in paints. A lot of esters have very strong flavorings and scents to them, so they can also be used in if you look at something and it says it has artificial flavors, that's pretty much likely that you're talking about an ester there. If you wanted to be a perfume scientist and make perfumes for like J.Lo or whoever, you'd be actually working with ester chemistry. They have very weak intermolecular forces, which allows them to vaporize easily, and you can smell them. We're actually going to make one of these in class. It is one safe organic reaction that we're able to do. They are actually made from organic acids. The amines and the amides can be a little bit easily confused because they have such similar names and they both have nitrogen in them. So there are only 2 functional groups that have nitrogen. So the amine functional group is just an N with some stuff on it. Very frequently it's going to be a carbon chain with like an NH2 on it, something like that. But they actually can be kind of part of that chain as well. Amines have a lot of variety. We kind of stick to some of the simpler ones. Your similar compound is the amide. The difference here is there will be nitrogen, but no oxygen here. When we want to name an amide, so if we look at our example right here, I'm going to draw this out. We have CH3, CH2, CH2, N2. And you could also, a lot of people would show the end here if they wanted to and put an H on the end. Doesn't really make any difference. So you see that you have 3 carbons in a row. So this is called prop. So this is a single bonded carbon chain. So it's propane. And we take that E off and we add amine. So we're going to start our naming by naming our carbon chain, removing an E, add amine, and we do have a number telling where that nitrogen is attached. So our prefix here is just going to be typical table P prefix. Our suffix here is that amine ending, and our number tells where N is attached. So you could actually, very easily change this. If you put the N here, that would be 2-propanamine. Amides are pretty similar. These are kind of a little bit more similar to some things you might have learned about in biology last year. These have this double bonded carbon, and then a nitrogen, the least one H on it. You can actually have something else end up here, but you don't always. A lot of the ones that we're going to look at will end up looking more like this. So similar compounds to this are the amines. The way that we tell them apart is this has nitrogen and a double bonded oxygen. When we name an amide, you're going to notice in this particular example, they did put the group on the end. There can be a little bit of variety here. We're going to stick to the simple naming where that group would be right on the end. So we started with naming our carbon chain. Oops. And we are going to drop that E, and we have an amide ending. So our prefix here is still a table P prefix. Our suffix here is amide, and no, we put that group right on the end. In this particular example, these can have a little bit more variety, but we'll stick to ones where that amide group is right on the end. The amines are really common in B vitamins, hormones, neurotransmitters, anesthetics, preparations of dyes, amino acids, if you remember hearing about those. These are pretty similar to amino acids. This is kind of a simplified way of looking at those types of compounds. So in an amino acid, we have actually a full amine group. So we have that amine NH2 over here. We have the side chains right here that differ depending on which amino acid you're talking about. And then we have a nice little Cu group right over here. And those can be strung together to make proteins. So when you make a peptide bond, what you're actually doing is taking the H from an amine and the OH from a carboxylic acid, and that water actually comes off and leaves as one of the products. I think they sometimes call this condensation synthesis, and that makes that peptide bond that's essentially the formation of a polymer, which are your proteins. And then if you want to look at DNA, you have the same, types of bonds occurring here. You have nitrogen bases in deoxyribonucleic acid, and you also have those phosphate groups. You have simple sugars involved as well. So you can see a lot of the functional groups that we've been looking at and a lot of the structures we've been talking about present in this molecule. And remember, DNA is what's coding for your every 3 letters, remember, codes for one of your amino acids, which then gets strung together into your proteins. All that stuff I find really, really fun. There are specific names for some of these parts. An OH group is called a hydroxyl group. A C double bonded O is a carbonyl group. The Cu group actually has the name carboxyl, so it kind of combines those. And an NH2 group is what we call an amino group. One last thing I'd like to have you add really quickly. With some of these, we talked about the fact that they have a condensed formula. We've talked a lot about Ku groups, so that's not unfamiliar. Esters tend to confuse people a little bit. If we condense this down, this molecule would become CH3, CH2, COO, CH3. Sometimes the Cooch group, I guess you could call it. And if you're doing the same thing, you're trying to condense down an amide, you just pull that O down like that. So you do have to be able to recognize these if they're given that way in a particular question.